we already have some serious continuous integration in place inside of our GitHub repository. Now on our pull requests, as soon as they happen or as soon as they receive new commits, the continuous integration process is triggered. No more waiting for merges. And that continuous integration process includes some checks. So that means that we see some information in here about the builds for both iOS and for Android. Now, it's a good thing actually in here that my Android build was cancelled for some reason, because notice that now we see that one is successful and the other one isn't. And if we navigate over to checks, we see exactly the same thing. One is successful, the other one was just cancelled. So this should mean that we haven't completed the checks just yet. However, if we navigate back to the conversation, we can still merge this pull request. Of course, we know that this is enabled because, one, we are the actual creators of this repository, so we can do whatever we want, but also there aren't any protection rules in place. However, with these new checks that have been enabled, we can add some additional protection rules to our branches. So that is exactly what we will take a look at in this lecture. I am going to navigate over to settings. And we know that on the branches section, we can set some protection rules. So I will add a new rule in here. And this rule is going to be for the test branch. In a second, I will also create the rules for the master branch though, so this will apply to both of them. But notice that not only, of course, are you able to select to require certain reviews before merging. This is something that we have seen before when we worked with an additional GitHub account. I won't be setting this right now because I'm only one person. But also, if we select these require status checks to pass before merging, we can see down below these two status checks that are new, that weren't here before, because they were just added through App Center. What this means is that when we merge or when we create a pull request to merge into test, both of these checks that are coming from App Center will have to pass, meaning that the application will have to build for the merging to be enabled. If they don't pass, we cannot merge into test. So hopefully you start to realize the power of continuous integration, how it really helps us protect our branches. So I will enable this and I will create this protection rule. And I will also just navigate back to the branches and create another rule, this one for master. And master is going to have two protection rules. One, it is going to require one approving reviews, meaning that I will probably have to add a collaborator here eventually, but it will also require for these two checks to pass. So in this case, the master branch is really protected because not only the build has to be successful over on App Center, but a certain person has to approve the changes, has to add an approving review, so an additional protection in here, and create. This way, now my two branches, the test branch and the master branch, are very well protected. In fact, let's go ahead and navigate over to code. And so far, you may remember that our dev branch already contains some commits that are not yet on dev. Ones that are currently outdated because we have some new commits in feature 3, but it already contains some additional commits, merging from feature 1 and from feature 2, for example. So what I will do is create an additional pull request, and this one is still open, by the way. We haven't yet merged from feature 3. But I will create a new pull request. Let's say that feature 1 and feature 2 are ready to be tested by our test team, and I will set the base of test and the compare to dev. So everything that is new in dev can be added to test, and we see that there are 5 commits that would be added. I will create the pull request, and by the way, before I do that, I haven't set things on App Center. I'm forgetting about a very important part in here. So I will navigate over to App Center, over to both of my applications, over to build, and configure the test build. So configure build for test. This is still going to be debug. This is still going to be a simulator bug. This is still going to build on every push, automatically increment the build number. Eventually, we're going to be testing on real devices, which means we will have to change things a little bit, but that is for further down in this section. And I won't create any status badge for this one. Maybe eventually I will. I will save things. And I will do the same thing for my Android application. So over to build, configure the test branch. Everything is going to be just as we have seen before. Eventually we will change. For now, the configuration for the two branches is pretty much identical. Click on save. And now this configuration for the builds are in place. Now we can come back to GitHub and actually create the pull request. As soon as the pull request is created, notice down here, we see something very similar, but it says that the statuses must pass before merging. Because we are still the owners of this repository, we can still just merge, but we see a big warning in here. Sure, as an administrator, I can still merge, but since these haven't passed just yet, and there is something wrong with my Android configuration apparently, it's being cancelled again, we'll take a look at that. But so far, because they haven't passed, I see this big red button in here. And in fact, if I were a collaborator, not an administrator of this repository, I wouldn't be able to merge. I wouldn't see the merge button enabled, at least until these two builds pass. So here is where the protection of these branches can be really helpful, because the builds over an App Center will have to pass. And of course, if we navigate over to build, we see that the test branch is currently building, at least for the iOS application. And there is apparently something happening with my Android configuration because it is being cancelled, as it happened with this one. But hopefully you can see how this continuous integration process will enable you to protect your branches. And by the way, you could of course also add this protection over to the dev branch. So far, only our test and master branches contain it. Now, in the next lecture, we're going to take a look at the entire process now that our continuous integration is fully configured for both our Android and iOS applications and for the three branches, dev, test, and master. In the next lecture, we're going to start everything directly from Visual Studio, where everything usually begins. We're going to code a small new feature inside of our application, of course on a feature branch. And we will have to follow the entire flow from Visual Studio over to GitHub and of course see the entire continuous integration process be triggered as we create new pull requests and merge into different branches.